If you have any doubts about the power of influencer marketing, then stay tuned. Pia Chandra Masters of Talk Doesn't Cook Rice, Yuan Fung of Sushi Vid, and Richard Kerr of Richard Kerr Digital make a lively combination of creative director, techie, and influencer for our next session.
Hi, welcome everybody to this panel. My name is Pia. I come from an agency called Talk Doesn't Cook Rice. I'm creative director of that agency. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of, is influencer marketing still relevant in this age of marketing technology? We have a lot to cover, so I would love to just dive straight in and get our beautiful panelists here today, Wen and Richard, to introduce themselves.
Okay, hey guys, my name is Wen and I'm the founder and CEO of SushiVid. So we've been running influencer marketing for 7 years, and I hope that this session will be helpful for all of you.
Hi, I'm Richard Kerr. I run my own creative marketing agency called Richard Kerr Digital, branded under my own name. So basically why I exist, because I see a lot of opportunities to help startups and entrepreneurs out there to tell their stories to regional and global level.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's just tackle this question straight away. Do you both think that influencer marketing is still relevant, and why?
So let me answer that question first. So yeah, of course, I think to put it really simple, yes, it is still very much relevant. In fact, I think it's getting even more relevant nowadays compared to a few years ago, as more and more people in the industries started to realize the benefits of engaging with influencers to push out their brands, push out their products, and to really build awareness. And as I think one of the contributing factors to that is because people on social media, they want to listen to people. They don't really want to listen to companies because they, people work with people, right? People don't really work with companies. So I think that basically that is what I'm trying to say.
Well, on my end, I actually absolutely agree with Richard. I don't think I have anything else to add. Definitely, it's still relevant. Otherwise, I won't exist. Yeah.
Okay. So I would love to hear, what trends do you see in influencer marketing?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this. I think previously it was more long form content, starting with blogs, and then we moved on to more accessible stuff like social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube. When YouTube first came out, it's like difficult for a lot of people to get access because we don't have the smartphones, we don't have the kind of data capacity. But today with 5G and with better mobile phone and good cameras, right, it's like super easy, and now everybody can be an influencer. And now with platforms like TikTok, where you just touch and let go, right, it's like there's just a lot more influencers today than there were 5 years ago.
Yeah, so I think in with just what Wen mentioned, I think more and more people have more opportunities to be content creators themselves, and it really reduced the kind of friction that you need to push out content on various social media platforms. For instance, like YouTube, I think a couple of years ago, I think it was quite difficult. You need to do editing yourself, and then you need to use various tools. But nowadays, if you have like TikTok, for instance, you can just shoot yourself and then upload quite immediately, and then get the kind of results that sometimes it's mind-blowing. It actually opens up a lot of opportunities to people who are passionate about teaching Excel, for instance, and they can just go on the platform and teach people and really build huge audience in a very short period.
Yeah, I think we cannot talk about TikTok without talking about Gen Zs, right? And without Gen Zs, you cannot talk about that without talking about millennials. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how, do you think there's a difference in the way that Gen Zers and millennials consume content?
Okay, so to answer this question, I look at Gen Zers as people like my niece, right, versus millennials who are probably like my fresh grads today. And the key difference that I find is that the young people today are a lot more concerned about their privacy. So like my young niece is 14 this year, and every time she put up something on social media, she covers the eyes, she covers the face, she makes some kind of action that actually gives her a little bit of privacy. And we can see this evidently from the rise of Snapchat and also Instagram stories, right? Because people are starting to feel like, oh, I don't want something so permanent. And this is what I see the trend for the Gen Zs, whereas for the millennials, we are more like, oh, let's hold on to our memories, put it there forever, that kind. Yeah, that's the key difference that I find between the Gen Zs and the millennials.
Yeah, so I guess from at least from my point of view, I think probably a lot of people would have read this news already in terms of how new platforms like TikTok is becoming like a search engine, trying to compete directly with Google and YouTube. So I guess that actually opens up a lot of opportunities for brands to go onto a newer platform, and even existing content creators to repurpose some of their contents to be made available on TikTok, for instance. So I think the way people consume information, it will be totally different. I think it's interesting like how something like this happens, because if you think about 4 to 5 years ago, you can't imagine like people are actually using social media platforms to search for information, because traditionally it's always about using the search engines.
That is such an interesting point. I think the way that we consume content is constantly changing. The landscape is constantly changing. Every day it's changing. I would really love to touch on, what do you think influencers' roles are in marketing, and how that can work alongside brands?
I think influencers drive authenticity, right? Because people don't want to be shouted at. Back then when we used to watch TV and we have 5 channels only, it's like you are forced to absorb whatever people give you. It's not like you have an option. But today when you watch TV, you're also scrolling your phone on the side, right? People are choosing. People have the option to choose, and information is widely available, right? So people authenticity, people want to hear the real thing. So a lot of like skincare brands, for example, right, you're like, oh, this is good for that. People actually can turn around, look at the ingredient, no matter how scientific the name of the ingredient is, they can Google it and find out, what is the side effect of this particular element in the products. So there is no more, I guess in a way, no more false pretense, or no more inauthenticity, right? Because people are looking for truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think even from my experience, as you know, people, as I mentioned in my earlier points, people really wanted to relate themselves to other people, because I think you're actually bringing the level down to the level that you're able to converse with people who are actually able to respond to you. For instance, if you post something online, you would be able to, especially on a social, an influencer's social media, for example, and you will be able to see somebody responding to whatever questions that you put up. I think that is actually creates a lot more values compared to if it's just branding talking, if it's just a corporate site, you don't even actually know who's actually talking behind that. So people, I think nowadays they have the options, and I think this is something that the industry probably have to keep up as well, in terms of being flexible, in terms of creating the content, the content that they push out on corporates. Corporates mainly, I think they are the ones who actually need to think about how do they push out their content, because I have to be honest, a lot of the corporate social media pages, they're really, really boring and dry, and that's why, despite how much money or ads they put in, they're not actually getting the results they're hoping for. So yeah, I think that's actually some of the points that I wanted to highlight.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that authenticity is such a difficult topic to talk about, because if you're authentic, right? There's no such thing as recreating authenticity in marketing strategies and stuff like that. But I would love to hear, from a brand's point of view, how do you tap into that authenticity through influencers? Because you mentioned before that influencers bring in that authenticity. So how can brands tap into that?
I always call this the divine sandwich. First you say the good stuff, then you maybe put in a little bit not so great, and then you end it impactful with something good. So for example, in my instance, like when I work with influencers, sometimes, right, it'll be like, okay, she's really good, her content quality is really good, but if you're in a hurry, she's not the fastest because she really cares about her quality. So again, it's like I say that she's slow, but I didn't really say she's slow, right? So brands have to be able to accept a little bit of that, like, oh, I love this smell, this fragrance is great, but maybe not on my everyday, maybe for special occasion only. So like influencers have the right to say something like that, but brands a lot of times they shy away from that. They're like, oh, that's a little bit negative. But I mean, a little bit negative is authentic. It feels authentic, when you have a bit of good, a bit of bad, but overall great. So I would ask brands to approach it this way, like the divine sandwich.
From my point of view, I think what's great nowadays is because there are more and more influencers out there. So meaning there's a louder voice that could actually drive the industry. So instead of like the industry driving the influencers can drive the industry now, because then they have to start listening on what's actually happening on the ground. And this is what you call the social listening, basically. So this is very important for businesses because they need to know what's happening on the ground. Because sometimes when the corporate comms or the marketing team strategize, they only strategize in the office, but they're not actually sure what's actually happening on the ground. So this is why the influencers are able to influence, they know, because they deal with their audience on a day-to-day basis. They know what their audience is actually looking for. So I think this is actually very important for a lot of influencers. I think they should really, really unite and try to drive the industry.
Okay, very, very good point there. I would love to delve deeper into this and kind of like the day-to-days on how brands can use influencer marketing as a tool. Do you have any tips on how you can select or even manage influencers? Anything around that area?
Okay, so for me, I think again, this is as an agency as a whole, right? We all specialize in this for a reason. So like, for example, the people in Google Ads, they do Google Ads for every other company. They do like 20 different companies. So what they learn from one company, they can put onto your company as well. So the same thing with influencer marketing. Yes, you can hire an executive and do it yourself. It will be maybe more affordable, depending how much you spend. But that strategy and that learning that an agency has across multiple industries and categories, right, is invaluable. And it's something that you can't just hire an executive to do for you. I believe genuinely that if you are taking influencer marketing seriously, you need a strategist behind it. And there really isn't that many of us around. And that's why I would encourage that. Or otherwise, do a lot of reading, right? Just go on YouTube, go on TikTok, watch what other people are doing. That source you can learn yourself, but it may take time.
Yeah, I think from my input, at least, I think this has also opened up interesting opportunities for brands, because there are a lot of influencers out there. Sometimes they're struggling what kind of content they should create. So if they would be able to pinpoint or even identify some potentially growing influencers who have a great audience or and a growing audience, they probably could identify them and work with them directly. And of course, try to see the opportunities in pushing out some of the products. And then, of course, they would have to work together with them in terms of creating that content that would not actually oversell. Because as you know, oversell, sort of oversell, but hard sell. Because as you know, today, a lot of people get really easily turned off, especially social media audience, if it's hard sell. So they need to find ways on how to, create content that is not so hard sell and more on the soft sell. And even for myself, I think the way I built my company today, it's about storytelling. It's about creating an environment that is not to hard sell, not to really push out the products it's talking about. For instance, I work with some of the brands. We're talking about behind the scenes, what's actually happening in the background. We don't actually talk about the products. It's very much like how some of the top brands nowadays, like for instance, Nike don't really talk about their shoes. They talk about the athletes. And if you look at Red Bull, for instance, Red Bull, they're actually selling energy drinks, but they don't actually talk about the energy drinks. They talk about the sports and everything. So I think a lot of the brands today need to start thinking about that kind of approach. And in terms of creating the content that would actually help them grow their audience and make them more relatable to their relevant target audience.
Okay, I just want to add one point. Sorry, Pia. I just think that everybody can be a content creator today. So if any one of you who's listening to this webinar feel like, you want to give it a shot, do it, because there is just enough space for every one of us. There really is a lack of specialization in this in Malaysia. There are not really that many finance influencers, not many automotive influencers. There really isn't a lot of people who are, talking about board games, for example. So there really is a lot of gap for expertise, right? And I would love, I'd love for you guys to get started on content creation yourself, even as a brand, right? Don't have to wait to hire somebody. You are the expert and you should do your own content. And I think that's very powerful. I think everybody should start doing something about that.
I love that. I think that Andy Warhol famously once said, right? Everybody will have their 15 minutes of fame. Not saying that this is your 15 minutes of fame, but then it's just a testament that everybody can get there if they want to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I would love to just wrap up, but before we wrap up, I think Wen, you would like to, plug in a little bit of your masterclass that's coming up. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So guys, I actually thank you so much to the Brand Geeks team, right? I have an extra slot for myself to talk about influencer marketing and maybe how to be an influencer or how to engage an influencer. I'll be talking from both sides, the brand and the influencer side, what works and what are the best practices. So guys, do stay tuned, join me for my masterclass in the next session.
All right. So if you want to do that, I'm sure that you can find the information on the website. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much, Wen and Richard, for also being here and sharing with us your wealth of knowledge. And everybody who's watching, I hope that you did learn and pick up a thing or two. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Work. Boring. Work. Work. Let's collaborate. Work. We'll motivate. Work. Now take a break.